After a tense few days, on January 15th, 2025, the news that everyone had been desperately hoping for finally came.
It is with great pleasure in Qatar, Egypt and the United States to announce the success of the joint mediation efforts that the two belligerents and the Gaza Strip have reached a deal on the prisoner and the hostage swap, and the return to sustainable calm in the hopes of reaching a permanent ceasefire between the two sides, as well as allowing the access of large quantities of relief aid to the Palestinian brothers and the Gaza Strip.
Gaza has suffered through 15 months of war. At least 46,707 have been killed, with that number likely to rise. With the news, joy spread in Gaza, but a joy mixed with intense sadness. Wafa al-Habil, displaced from Gaza City, spoke with reporters in Khan Yunis.
I'm very, very happy. I want to go back and kiss the ground and the soil of Gaza. I'm longing for Gaza City and longing for our loved ones. And I'm sad for those who left us. I'm very, very happy.
This week, what are the terms of the ceasefire and why now? Can the ceasefire hold? And what does it mean for the future of Gaza? My name is Hugo Goodridge, and you're listening to the New Arab Voice. The ceasefire deal between Israel and Hamas was brokered after many, many months of discussions by the United States, Qatar, and Egypt. The ceasefire deal is split into 3 phases. Each phase covers a defined period of time. And within these phases, there are a set of conditions that each side is expected to adhere to. Due to the phased nature of the ceasefire, Israeli forces remain in Gaza today. To go through the details of the plan and find out when Israeli forces would actually leave, I sat down with the New Arab's senior news editor, Nada Osman.
Yeah, so just to give you a little rundown, we're currently only in stage 1 of the ceasefire, which is set to last for 42 days. The terms say that Israeli forces should be gradually withdrawing from most parts of the Strip to areas no more than 700 meters inside Gaza's border with Israel. So that essentially means that they're just withdrawing from main population centers.
But they will remain in Gaza.
Yeah, so also in Gaza, it's currently cut in two by the Netzarim corridor, which Israel installed south of Gaza City. Mm-hmm. The Israeli army says it's not expected to begin withdrawing from the area until day 7 of the truce.
Okay.
It is quite complicated as well. I mean, stage 1 of the deal says that Israeli forces will gradually reduce their presence from the Salahuddin corridor, also known as the Philadelphia corridor.
That's on the border with Egypt and Gaza, correct?
Yeah, correct. And after the last captive is released in phase 1 of the deal, Israeli forces will begin their full withdrawal.
Phase 1 is set to last 6 weeks. So Israeli forces are set to remain in Gaza for the time being, but are required by the terms of the deal to withdraw from densely populated areas. For the Israeli public, perhaps the most important issue is the return of the remaining hostages. When the ceasefire deal was announced, 94 hostages were still being held by Hamas in Gaza. Back to Nada.
Yeah, so the first phase of the deal will see 33 captives released from Gaza over 6 weeks, and this will include women, children, and men over 50. So every week we're going to see 3 captive being released. Israel is going to be releasing 737 Palestinian detainees, most of whom have been held without trial or charge in Israeli jails. In terms of Palestinians being released, we have already seen some prominent names such as Khalid al-Jarrar, who's been freed, but others will be those with life sentences.
Right.
In terms of phase 2 of the deal, we're going to see all the remaining captives freed from Gaza, which will mainly be male soldiers. At this point, we'll also see a permanent ceasefire and the complete withdrawal of the Israeli army, and a large number of Palestinians also to be freed from Israeli jails.
So as I understand it, there's sort of a ratio has been agreed between the number of hostages being held in Gaza being released to then that equating to a specific number of Palestinians from prisons being released.
Correct, yeah.
The need for a ceasefire has been desperate. While Israel has suffered losses, militarily speaking, Hamas have been unable to foster any genuine resistance to the full force of Israel, particularly its air force. This is the case today, but it's also been the case for many months. So why has the ceasefire deal been reached now? Why not last month or 6 months ago?
I think multiple threads have converged to make this possible now.
This is Ahmed Fouad Al-Khatib, a resident senior fellow at the Snowcroft Middle East Security Initiative at the Atlantic Council. Today, Ahmed lives in the US, but originally hails from Gaza.
Unlike what we had back in May or July, I think you have a shifting regional geopolitical scene with what happened with Hezbollah and how the Israelis were indeed able to inflict maximum damage upon the leadership of the Lebanese organization. And I think that's really important to state because Hamas was indeed looking to Hezbollah as a way to balance out the pressure against the Israelis.
Hamas was, and technically still is, part of what is known as the Axis of Resistance. Together with Hezbollah in Lebanon, the Houthis in Yemen, the regime of Bashar al-Assad in Syria, and Iran, they advertise themselves as the collective force to oppose Israel and secure Palestinian liberation.
You have then the indirect kind of link to that is the fall of the Assad regime in Syria, means that Hezbollah's fate has been sealed as far as the near-term weakening of this important resistance ally that Hamas has looked to. And so that, coupled with Iran's inability to really effectuate Israel's calculus, despite 2 direct attacks on Israel in April and in October.
Additionally, by the time that a ceasefire deal was signed, Hamas was a shadow of what it had previously been, particularly when it comes to fiery personalities and leadership figures.
Then you have the elimination of Sinwar in Gaza. You have Ismail Haniyeh being eliminated. You have a whole host of mid-level commanders of the Qassam brigades in Gaza who have been eliminated, such that in the near term, the bench of Hamas's leadership has been hollowed out.
These were important factors, undoubtedly, but it would seem that the most motivating factor as to why we had a ceasefire deal when we did was down to one man.
Seemingly what changed this time is that first we had a new president coming into office in Washington.
This is Nimrod Goren, president and founder of Metavim, the Israeli Institute of Regional Foreign Policies,
who made a case that he insists on having a deal before his inauguration and was willing to send his envoy to work with the outgoing administration envoy and do a joint mediation, which is very, very rare in American politics, while indicating that he will put significant pressure on whatever side does not agree. So that is kind of the game changer in terms of the mediation structure and the pressure on the side.
Perhaps most beautiful of all, this week we achieved an epic ceasefire agreement as a first step toward lasting peace in the Middle East. And this agreement could only have happened as a result of our historic victory in November. That was some victory. Was that great? I don't even
like
know
him
which was
or
winner.
loathe him, Donald Trump's imminent arrival to the White House did play a significant role. Ahmed Fouad Al-Khatib again.
You had a combination of Mr. Trump wanting a quick victory for his inauguration today, Mr. Trump wanting to begin his second second tenure rather, with the guns falling silent in Gaza so that he can focus on his other regional priorities, including Saudi-Israeli normalization, including maximum pressure on Iran, including the possibility eventually of rejuvenating the deal of the century. But most importantly, you have the domestic agenda.
While Trump did obviously have a large impact on the decision to have a ceasefire Now, the efforts of the Biden administration shouldn't be overlooked. As has been pointed out by other observers, the details and layout of the plan are strikingly similar to the plan that was brokered back in May by former Secretary of State Antony Blinken and his team. However, they were unable to get it over the line. At the time, it was speculated that Netanyahu and the far-right elements in his government were a major blockage to this. This time round, the pressure on Netanyahu appears to have been much greater.
It was much more of a pressure on Netanyahu to accept Hamas was completely desperate. They had no horizon whatsoever. They were stuck, but they also didn't, despite there was a graph, if you will, of Hamas's desperation, such that it reached a point beyond which Gaza was already destroyed. A lot of their leadership had already been eliminated. And yet they were in this situation where they didn't have to provide for Gaza. A steady flow of humanitarian supplies kept Gaza above starvation level. And so they were desperate, but they basically had no incentive to, throw in the white towel. Netanyahu, on the other hand, I think because of the relationship with the United States, because of the interest in seeing Iran contained completely, I think he was much more susceptible to pressure in ways that Hamas could not be. And so it was ultimately, I think, Mr. Trump and him giving a mandate to Witkoff to apply maximum pressure on Netanyahu.
What form this pressure took, we don't know. It's possible that promises were made to Netanyahu. Do this now, and later on down the line, you can do XYZ. It's possible. Time will tell. It seems fair to say that Netanyahu was likely pushed into agreeing to the ceasefire deal. Despite this, could we say that he and the Israeli government are happy with the terms of the deal?
I think there is more willingness than happiness to go for the deal. If you look at the vote within the Israeli government about it, you saw that there was 24 ministers in favor, but there were also 8 ministers voting against. So there's no consensus about it within the government. There is public support. There is a willingness by the political opposition to enable this safety net, security or political safety net for the government to push this forward. And again, there is this belief that, maybe we are not committing to all of the package, and there could be a way out that enables some of the far-right ministers, like Bezalel Smotrich, to maybe oppose the deal but stay in coalition and see what happens later on.
The devastation wrought by the war in Gaza has been well documented. See previous episodes of the New Arab Voice. And the need for humanitarian aid is beyond critical. In the studio, Nada explained to me what the ceasefire deal reveals about the delivery of aid.
Currently, the truce requires at least 600 truckloads of aid to be allowed into Gaza daily for 6 weeks, including 60 of them carrying fuel. In case that sounds like a lot, I'm just going to make it clear that that's actually a drop in the ocean, because that's actually the same amount that was going into Gaza before the war.
Right.
So now, considering all the needs on the ground, it's just, it's not enough at all. And obviously, throughout the war, we've seen Israel largely obstruct aid. There's been issues with telecommunication services. The North had no functioning ambulances, only one partially functioning hospital. So we're looking at pretty much all infrastructure decimated in terms of sewage networks, schools, bakeries, medical facilities. But aid is trickling in slowly. Rights groups have kind of raised concerns previously that famine is imminent in the north. I mean, we've seen several deaths of starvation in the north. We've also seen people die from hypothermia in recent weeks, over the kind of Christmas winter period. So in terms of conditions, things are really, really awful, and aid operations are still facing a lot of logistical challenges. I mean, when you look at Gaza, you have got the crossings and you've got the roads which are completely destroyed. So it's going to be a very slow and long process.
Prior to the start of the war and during the war, goods and materials being transported into Gaza were inspected by Israel. These items were cross-referenced with a list of so-called dual-use items. That is to say, goods and materials that Israel believes could have both civilian and military purposes. If the items were on the list, then entry was prevented. The list of dual-use goods and materials was exhaustive, including water purifiers, medical supplies, including anesthetics, solar lights, tents, refrigerators, the list goes on. Humanitarian organizations would often complain that critical materials and goods were being denied entry by Israel. The ceasefire agreement does not make mention of the policy of prohibiting dual-use items, but we've also not heard that the policy would end, which also seems unlikely. During the conflict, it was often said that Netanyahu needs the war to continue to ensure his political survival. It was believed that without the war, then either his ongoing corruption trial or the failures of the state on October 7th would put an end to his political career. It was also said that if a ceasefire deal was agreed to, then the far-right members of his cabinet, namely National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir and Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich, would prompt the collapse of his government. Itamar Ben-Gvir reaffirmed his threat on January 14th.
The deal that is being developed is a surrender deal to Hamas. I call on my friend, Minister Bezalel Smotrich, to join me and cooperate with me against the deal that is being developed. Otzma Yehudit does not have the power on its own to prevent the deal. But together we can go to the Prime Minister and inform him that if he passes the deal, we will resign from the government.
A ceasefire deal was agreed the next day, and on the 19th of January, Ben-Gvir followed through on his threat and resigned. Does this mean the end of Netanyahu's premiership is in sight? Nimrod Goran again.
His resignation letter was submitted, they were put into effect, and basically he's out. But he's out of the coalition while, signaling that he could come back in if the war resumes. And second, indicating that he will not be the one to topple the right-wing government. So even when outside of the coalition, it's not necessarily that Netanyahu has a fierce rival in parliament that will work to topple him.
While criticising the deal and resigning, Ben-Gvir did also add his desire not to topple the government.
Smotrich, as I mentioned, stayed in the coalition for now, re-evaluating it maybe later on when phase one ends. So Netanyahu is in a more delicate political situation, of course, with his far-right coalition partners, but he managed recently to a bit expand the base of his coalition by bringing in Gideon Sa'ar, who is now the foreign minister, and his small party. So he has some more room to maneuver than he had before. Plus, the hostage and ceasefire release deal is not going to a Knesset vote. It's only going to the government where he has the majority anyway. So if there will be a scenario of a change in Israeli politics, something that many in Israel want to see, it will probably not be on the ceasefire deal, but rather on all kind of other issues like the budget, like ultra-Orthodox military service that will be fueled by the divisions on the ceasefire, but will not be directly moved by that.
Things are still difficult for Netanyahu. Aside from the war, there are a number of issues that impact both him personally and his government. But fundamentally, Netanyahu is a political survivor. He has proven this, time and time again. As we previously mentioned, the ceasefire deal is split into 3 phases. Currently, we are in phase 1. Discussions about phase 2 and 3 are ongoing, and the precise details have not been revealed nor agreed upon. Broadly, we know that phase 2 will complete the release of Israelis held in Gaza and see all Israeli forces leave Gaza, while phase 3 is set to focus on post-war governance, the return of the bodies of Israeli captives, and reconstruction plans. But the question isn't so much what will the details of phase 2 and 3 be, it's will the ceasefire of phase 1 hold long enough for us to see the next phases begin?
It's really difficult to see a scenario in which this ceasefire perseveres beyond the second phase. And the thing about the third phase is that that's the one that does deal with issues of governance, reconstruction. That's the one that deals with Gaza's kind of stabilizing Gaza for the future. And the reconstruction issue, I mean, that's the one that would cement Hamas's perpetual control of Gaza. The problem with the current deal, and I certainly, like I said, I want to be clear, I mean, not just as an observer or commentator, as a Palestinian from Gaza, I'm extraordinarily relieved. I mean, I have siblings, I've family in Gaza right now, so I'm extraordinarily relieved for any respite from the fighting and from the violence. The tragedy, the sadness is that this agreement amounts to little more than freezing of the conflict. It does nothing to initiate political transformation.
If the return of hostages was key for an Israeli audience, then the end of Hamas followed a close second. It was also a key objective of Netanyahu's total victory mantra.
But as Israelis saw on TV when the first hostages were released, the Hamas presence in the street of Gaza is very much visible. Okay, and as we know, not all hostages are back home. We have 94 who still have not returned. So the war objectives are not the ones that have been fulfilled until now. Plus, I think there is a concern about the day after. So that may not be a concern of the government, but many others in Israel that wanted to see after October 7th a real transformational change in what's happening in Gaza basically see that the same group is still there. And Netanyahu is not willing to work with plans that will bring back the Palestinian Authority with regional international support, basically kept a situation where Israel has to face Hamas. And that could be the argument that we will hear in a few weeks' time when phase one of the ceasefire ends for why the war should resume. Because if Hamas is still there, and if the war objective was to make sure that Hamas is not governing, then you have the reasoning that will lead the government messaging on why fighting should come back.
There was intense joy when a ceasefire was announced, but there is also skepticism that the deal can last. A skepticism that those in power have any interest in it lasting. It doesn't inherently mean a return to the full-scale carnage that we've seen over the past 15 months. More likely, it would be a lower intensity, but no less deadly, form of warfare. If war does return to Gaza, Israel's political and military leaders will likely cite the continued existence and presence of Hamas in Gaza as the reason for the resumption of hostilities. Does this mean that Hamas is done in Gaza? Will Israel never rest until Hamas is gone?
So basically it's two issues. The first about Hamas and their perception in Israel. I think Hamas is a done deal in terms of how people in Israel view it as a potentially legitimate governor of Gaza. That's gone. Hamas was in power for years before October 7, and there was a discussion occasionally about whether it could be moderated, where it could be gaining legitimacy as a political actor, moving away from terrorism. After October 7 and what Hamas did, nobody, I think, in Israel really sees that as an option that is reasonable.
It seems clear that Israel will never accept Hamas in Gaza. Even if it reformed, renounced violence, sought political dialogue, etc., they still would not accept Hamas in Gaza. Israel's Foreign Minister Gideon Saar made this fairly clear at a press conference on January 19th when he said this.
There is no future of peace, stability and security for both sides if Hamas stays in power in Gaza Strip.
But the Gazan people, will they ever want Hamas to control Gaza?
In Gaza, Hamas has lost in the sense that I don't think Hamas will ever be able to brainwash Gazans and its people in the way that it once did. I think Hamas has been completely exposed.
Ahmed is emphatic that Hamas cannot control Gaza again. Supporting Gaza for the group has dropped during the war. Polling from last September by the Palestinian Center for Policy and Survey Research reported that just 35% of respondents in Gaza supported Hamas. A separate poll by the West Bank-based Institute for Social and Economic Progress, also in September, showed that in Gaza, over half, 57.1%, believe that Hamas's rule in Gaza will end. And just 4.3% of respondents say they want Hamas alone to rule Gaza in a post-war scenario. Just under a third wanted to see the Palestinian Authority in control, while the majority, 46%, wanted a unity government. With the ceasefire deal now in effect, at least for the time being, it seems likely that we'll get more up-to-date polling in the near future. In the meantime, we can deal with perceptions. And a key perception when any war ends is who won the war.
I challenge anybody to look at Gaza and say we won. I challenge anybody to look at Gaza and say this is what victory looks like. I challenge anybody to look at Gaza and say this forms a building block upon which the pursuit of Palestinian independence, freedom, self-determination, dignity, liberation can actually be achieved. If anything, this pushed the two-state solution far away. This created, this basically hardened a lot of Israelis. This killed the peace. This cemented the end of the peace movement within Israel, I think.
Undoubtedly, the biggest loser from this war is the Palestinian people. The losses and trauma they have experienced over the past 15 months will take lifetimes to recover from. Also, the Palestinian movement for liberation has been pushed back immeasurably.
I actually think Hamas's greatest defeat is not with the Israelis, is not the operational kind of tactical battlefield considerations. It lost with the people of Gaza, who have had to endure the consequences of its attacks. As for whether or not Hamas lost, it's difficult to look at some of the sceneries from Gaza. And yes, they've lost, on the one hand, they've lost a lot of their soldiers, a lot of their launchers, a lot of their kind of control. They're not what they used to be on October 6th. On the other hand, that they were in northern Gaza with hostages right next to the Netzarim corridor, that they still have their vehicles and their uniforms and are holding these hostages, and were able to come out in this provocative manner. It's hard not to say that maybe they didn't win, but they didn't lose. And that's the thing with asymmetric guerrilla groups, is that you win by simply not losing.
The as yet unagreed upon third phase of the ceasefire deal is due to deal with the post-war governance in Gaza. The prospects of Hamas being the enclave's rulers look pretty slim, but if not them, then who?
So for some on the Israeli right, it means that the war will go on until Hamas is defeated. So Hamas is still there, so fighting should continue. Others advocate for a new type of governance in Gaza, which the mediators and other international actors have been trying to advance, meaning we need to bring the Palestinian Authority in whatever form it will have that, is a reformed, more capable, more legitimate, still moderate. That should be the governing power of basically the West Bank and Gaza Strip together, like it was before Hamas took over Gaza. And that could not be done alone. It has to get the support of some Arab countries, of the European Union, of the Americans. We heard some countries in the Gulf, like the UAE, already indicating that if the PA, the Palestinian Authority, invites them, they will pitch in. But that requires a willingness also by the Israeli coalition to really change the power of balance of governance within Gaza. And currently, the Israeli coalition that we have now does not seem to buy into this scenario. And we'll see what the new American administration thinks, because we knew how Biden tried to advance this plan, but it's not clear whether Trump will have the same scenario as his desired future.
I think the biggest potential disaster in this would be Hamas, if essentially not engaging the Palestinian Authority, not really thinking outside the box, not really moving beyond this silly, victory narrative And this, that like we won despite the fact that tens of thousands are dead, despite the fact that Gaza's in ruins, there's no economy, Gaza is as isolated as Gaza's aid dependent. And so it is my hope that a combination of the Palestinian Authority kind of as the broad framework for diplomatic legitimacy, just even facilitating financial transactions. I mean, think of the billions of dollars that are needed for reconstruction. They're not going to be wired to Hamas. The Palestinian Authority has the financial legitimacy worldwide to even just facilitate the transfer of those funds. Like we need the PA, regardless of how much some might loathe the PA. It's time to seize the moment by the Palestinian leadership. If Hamas really wants to go beyond October 7th, if they want to actually make this count, they have to reinvent themselves. They have to elevate themselves into the political arena and to ensure that this is Gaza's last war, that Gaza evolves to become the pride and joy of the Palestinian people. And it's reconstructed in a way where it's not just a reconstruction of what was there, but Gaza needs to be reconstituted, both physically and metaphorically, as to what is the role of Gaza in the Palestinian national project.
Whoever is going to be in control of Gaza and responsible for the lives of the people of Gaza, they'll be ruling over a land that has been shattered. The reconstruction of Gaza is estimated to be $50 billion. Simply clearing the estimated 42 million tons of rubble will take 8 to 10 years, according to the United Nations. It will take a vast effort and a vast sum of money, and few nations have the funds available to spend on such a monumental task. Back to Nada Osman in the studio about what the recent ceasefire deal says on the topic of reconstruction.
Like you said, it's incredibly vague at the moment. I mean, Qatar's foreign minister the other day said they were still finalising and working on the terms of the second phase. So right. You can only imagine for the third phase of the deal. I think many people are also quite nervous and apprehensive about the deal lasting past the first stage. I know Palestinians for sure are. Trump's made a similar comment in recent days as well. But to sum up, the US Secretary of State Antony Blinken said the PA would assume control of Gaza after the war, and international institutions, including the UN, would be called on to manage the reconstruction process. He said that international partners would be invited to help set up an interim administration, which would be made up of people in Gaza and representatives of the Palestinian Authority.
But no Hamas.
Yeah, and he kept referring in his speech about handing over to a fully reformed Palestinian Authority as soon as this was feasible. But he didn't really give any information on what that means, and he didn't elaborate too much on it. Again, we know that other countries are supposed to be contributing to peacekeeping efforts, but there hasn't been a roadmap or any idea about how this mammoth reconstruction project is going to be funded or how this administration is going to be set up.
Back to Ahmed Fouad Al-Khatib.
And as of now, no one wants to reconstruct Gaza. No one wants to invest in it. Not even the UN, especially now that Syria's, you have competition for resources. You have Lebanon is destroyed, large parts of it, not in the same way as Gaza, but after the war. So there's competition for reconstruction money. Now that Assad is gone, there's also a push for reconstructing Syria and investing in Syria. And a lot of the Gulf countries are looking at that. There's Sudan, which has had a disastrous run at a war. And just from a purely aid kind of UN-driven reconstruction, if you will, there are very finite reconstruction money.
Competition for reconstruction aid is massive. It was pretty competitive before the war, and mixed with the fall in the number of willing donor countries and a fall in the amounts that countries are willing to donate, it points to the fact that Gaza's reconstruction will likely take decades.
There are three horizons that people are looking at before they're willing to invest a penny in Gaza. Number one, and this is just the most broad of them all, They want assurances that this is actually Gaza's final war. I mean, this is like what? The fifth war in like 20 years since Hamas took over. Basically people are tired of this vicious cycle. And I'm sorry, but yes, you can talk about Israel's mowing the lawn policy, but Hamas is an enabler of Israel's mowing of the lawn policy, okay? And the international community feels that the Palestinians are not exceptional or entitled to infinite reconstruction money. So there's a horizon of how do we make sure this is Gaza's last war, number one. Number two, the political horizon of how do we make sure Hamas is not the sole body in charge of Gaza, such that Hamas is not in charge of the war and peace decisions, is not in charge of making the decision to launch wars or to maintain peace. And people feel very strongly about that. And then the third horizon is, how do we reconstruct Gaza, but do so in a way where this is the beginning of actual transformation, so that we don't go back to a situation where 70% of the population directly or indirectly needed aid.
Amidst all the tragedy, it's difficult to find any reasons to hope, particularly as the prospects that the ceasefire will hold beyond the first phase look uncertain. But there's also a strong argument to be made that while dealing with the immediate problems of today, focus on the future should not be lost.
I don't want Gaza to just be reconstructed. I want Gaza to be rejuvenated. There has to be a renaissance. There has to be, Gaza is immensely promising, as it's a finite territory, unlike the West Bank. It's easy to develop. It's like very well defined. It overlooks the Mediterranean. It has a gas field. It can have an airport like it once did. I actually flew into Gaza's short-lived airport in 1999 and in 2000. It can and should have a seaport. Gaza can be a linkage between Egypt and Jordan and Saudi Arabia through Israel. It can be part of the Abraham Accords. It can have its own seaport that allows for the Saudis and to have exports over the Mediterranean. I mean, the economic potential is so immense that it can not only transform Gaza away from aid dependency and being dependent on NGOs and UNRWA and all these different groups, but it can actually make a compelling case that what is in Gaza can absolutely be replicated in an occupation-free West Bank, because the Palestinian people have an entrepreneurial spirit. The Palestinian people, yes, many are isolated, they're upset, but if given a chance, a fair chance, with good leadership, with a helping international hand, will absolutely thrive and build a thriving society that can live side by side in peace with Israel.
Final words to Nimrod Goren.
But there is also an understanding that for progress towards peace, or to mobilizing society to being more open to that, you also need a different type of political leadership, a more moderate government, sidelining the extremists once again, and going into a path that the public can trust its government, which is not necessarily the situation now, but something that many Israelis are yearning for, a new type of leadership that can also pave the way for better regional relations, better ties with the Palestinians. Naftali Bennett and Yair Lapid, when they were in government before the current coalition, managed to do that in the limited time they have, and I think people want to see that happen again.
This episode of The New Arab Voice was written and produced by me, Hugo Goodridge. Our theme music was by Omar Al-Phil. The New Arab Voice will be back with a new episode shortly. Until then, you can find all our previous episodes on all major podcast platforms. You can check out our Instagram page and X account, both at TNA Podcasts, for additional content. And you can email us, podcast@newarab.com. That's podcast@newarab.com. You can subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an episode, and you can also rate and review, which helps us spread the word. Don't forget to follow the New Arab on Facebook, X and Instagram for all the latest news, analysis and opinion from the region.